Joined us. This is International Forum here in the studio. He's a lecturer in the University of Benin, Department of International Studies, right?
No, History and International Studies.
History and International Studies. Join me to welcome Don Felix Osame. Welcome to International Forum.
Thank you, Wilson.
Right.
Good afternoon.
Now, this is not the first time Russia and Georgia have been at each other's throats, but we have the bigger hand, which is the Russian hand over the neck, so to speak, right now, of Georgia. But it's like Russia have this advantage. Like the last line opined by Reverend Humphrey Arega, he said Russia is scared. Because if Georgia falls to the hands of the EU, definitely there must be a military base. And that will not favor Russia. Take it up from there.
The dynamics of power in the developed world is not exactly the way we elaborate it here. The world has become more and more interconnected. Globalization has seen to a lot of things happening that some 50 years ago were not considered possible. Georgia has already made moves to join the EU. That will eventually happen. The controversial Foreign Agents Bill has just been approved. That was going to happen. Even though the president of Georgia is saying that she will veto it, the prime minister and the Georgia Dream Party financier, the billionaire, they are in support of the bill. So, if we were to look at it critically, you will understand that this is power play. Russia knows what it is doing. But we cannot detract from the fact that Georgia is making greater inroads into joining the EU because the Georgians, the generation of Georgians that are actually pushing for most of the protests now, we call them Gen Z. They want to associate with the world of today. And there is every possibility that Georgia will belong to EU. Georgia is basically a European nation, even though it's in the West, it's in Asia. Russia is basically a European nation, even though it's in Asia. So their futures are tied to being able to connect with those values that make them see Europe as one. They will eventually join the EU. So the foreign agents law that has just been passed is one of those hooks that Russia is sinking into former Soviet satellite states, of which Georgia is one.
It's part of.
And interestingly, we may be looking at this discussion from one perspective. The same law has been in Russia since 2012, the Foreign Agents Law. The United States of America has a law like that too. So it's not, in fact, Putin keeps telling people that they are always looking at Russia. They are also not aware that the USA has a similar law. The distinction is the application of the law. While in America, they use it to ensure that there is control over how much funding actually is brought in by big establishments, NGOs from outside of the country. Within Russia, and as we expect they will play that in Georgia too, is to stifle dissent. That is just the decision. These are laws that are commonplace. Every country wants to protect its territory. It is part of sovereignty. Countries will not just leave their borders open for foreign influences to determine how the citizens and corporations and groups run their affairs. That is the duty of government, to regulate certain, in fact, majority of the conduct of the people in society is regulated by government. That's why we have laws in place. So it is not the law, it is the intent of the law and the application of the law that is to be evaluated here. That is why the Foreign Agents Law has just been passed in Georgia. It has passed. There's still protests going on. People have been protesting since April. It didn't stop the direction that it was to go. Because the leaders of the country will explain to you that you will not allow people from outside to begin to fund, in quotes, individuals and groups without the government knowing the source of the funding, the utility of the funds, and the eventual outcome of such activity. That means the government has failed in its obligation, in its primary responsibility of catering for the needs of the people. It is part of what the government must do.
As it stands right now, like what you said Georgia definitely must be part of the EU. That cannot be taken out of the table. And Russia's influence also cannot
be removed.
So how would Georgia now exist as a state?
You can't make an omelette without breaking eggs.
Is it going to be part of the EU with Russia's influence? Or part of the EU without Russia's influence, right? Because it's like it's getting more and more murky and complex.
It's complex, that is true. But Russia is the big brother in the former Soviet socialist republics. Russia is the driving force. Russia cannot even recreate it. Russia has, of course, a lot of people will accuse Putin of having that apprehension. Putin is still looking into the past. Putin grew up in Russia, in USSR. He knows the score. But again, we cannot say that Putin will be able to create the same USSR that existed up to 1991. Yet he can introduce a semblance. He may be able, with the resources at his disposal, to generate such control as happened before. But these are independent states. And the world, as I said, is becoming more and more integrated. So the younger generation, they have an open society now. The internet, intercontinental travels, right now we even talk of space tourism. The world has changed. The vestiges of the past cannot be wished away, but the future must come upon us. So Putin will put out everything to bear. Georgia is not going to be set free immediately. Let us look at the relationship between Mexico and the United States of America. Let us look at the relationship between Mexico, Brazil, Argentina, Panama, Cuba, and the United States of America. The United States is the big brother in that area. They will not survive without getting hooked to the United States of America. But they also want to exert their freedom. The same thing is happening here. Georgia wants to be part of EU. The attraction is there. But presently they are surviving because of their attachment to Russia. A child must become independent at a point in time. But before the child becomes independent, the child must be subject to the tutelage of the parents. So we should not see it as if it's a negative. It's what is going to happen. In history, when we study, we talk of trends and transformation. These are trends, and they are leading to transformation. Human society progresses by adaptation and improvisation. That is what Georgia is going through now. Georgia has copied a law. In fact, they call it the Russian law. Russia started that law from 2012.
Yeah.
Before Russia got that law in 2012, the US has already had the law.
The law, yeah.
So what are we talking about here?
So then why the fight? Why are the citizens of Georgia saying no to this, knowing fully that they'll be benefiting from this particular law?
No, they do not.
Because everything in Georgia, whether we want to like it or not, is Russia.
They do not see the benefits because the way Russia will apply it, the way Georgia will apply it, is to stifle dissent. Individuals, if you write a blog, if you go to YouTube, if you post a comment on the internet, if you post a meme, if you do a video, they will use that interpretation of the law to ask you, where do you get your funding from? Once your funding is from outside, then they will not use the interpretation of that law to see that once your funding is more than 20% from outside the country, then you are a foreign agent. And in places like Russia and Georgia, when you are described as a foreign agent, it's akin to being a traitor. It's stigmatizing. That is why people are reacting. Must you use this law? You can actually say, okay, if you publish anything that is libelous or that can lead to slandering any person or organization or even the government, we have local laws. But when you bring that foreign agent law into operation, it will push towards treasonable action. Even though they don't classify it as treason, the fines are higher, the prison term, if you are so arraigned, is greater. So it's a gag law.
It's a gag law.
That is why many people were reacting to it. But it has been passed.
But some are saying people that are reacting to these are like, NGOs being funded by foreign donors. That these are just the handiwork, or let's say is the handiwork of the EU that Georgia is trying to be part of. And that's why Putin is reacting also by making the law to go through the speedy passage. It's not like any other law. It was so fast. Despite the protests, about the reaction, the time taken for the law, for the bill to be passed into law, it's like too short because of the interest of Putin and Russia, because of that particular interest they have in Georgia.
Sincerely, who funds most of those NGOs? Is it Western-based organizations and Western-based international non-governmental organizations? Even international governmental organizations, they are from the West. So when they fund an NGO or an individual, are they funding the individual and the NGO for local content and development, or to project their own ideology and philosophy, particularly the LGBTQ movement? So we cannot remove that fact. He who pays the piper tells the tune. So when foreign funding is coming, foreign funding comes with strings attached. It's almost as if you get FDI, foreign direct investment. They come in with some conditions, terms and conditions. So those T and Cs cannot also be deleted. And when you accept those terms and conditions, you therefore necessarily have to condition your presentation to suit those who support your program. Part of what the government in Georgia is arguing, which Russia has already argued, is that if you take money from outside, you are likely to work against your own government. And that is not far from the truth. Even if you do not work against your government, you may be manipulated or influenced to begin to see the other as better than your own. That's psychological. You cannot remove that from the picture too.
Now, can one deduce right now that what is happening in general is like in a proxy war? Despite the fact that between Russia and Ukraine is out, just an ongoing weapon is carrying weapons, shooting, bomb here and there, but this kind of war is subtle. But there's an ongoing war right now in Georgia against the Russian Federation. The Russia is trying to fight back, or is fighting back.
Well, Thomas Hobbes did say then that states are like gladiators, that their eyes are always watching each other, their weapons are always posed and ready. That even though there's no physical conflict, the war is a continuous act. That men are always either prepared for, or they are actually in a state of war. You see the military, they're always going to drill exercises. Is it the day war starts that they start the fight? No, they prepared for it. So in this same situation, whether we describe it as proxy war or not, it is part of the engagement of states. In state interactions, there are necessary responses. It keeps happening.
All right.
It is normal. And for power to retain, power has to be expressed. That is what Russia is doing.
Thank you so much. I'm getting strong signal. We call it to wrap right now. But 30 seconds, in 30 seconds, what do you think will play out this time? The law has been passed, protest still ongoing. EU at the back of the mind of Georgians. So take it up from there, 30 seconds.
The application by Georgia for EU membership has already been forwarded. Even way back 2023, they've already started perfecting the act. So we cannot say that tomorrow Georgia will just suddenly pull out. It is going to be a process. In fact, one of the protesters actually argued that if within 10 years Georgia does not become a member of the EU, Georgia will cease to exist.
Wow.
And that is the kind of apprehension they are facing. But the future is pregnant.
So we don't know the future.
We cannot just say that Russia will swallow Georgia. No. But Russia needs satellite states to continue to express its power and influence. And some of these states will also want to set themselves free, and they will need support from outside their borders.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the wonderful analysis, but we're praised for terms of other circumstances, particular today's edition of International Forum. Thank you once more. Well, we'll keep on watching,
very much.
Keep on observing to see how all this will pan out. Law been passed, EU on site. What next for Georgia? Bye for now.